Howdy folks, good afternoon. Here's a fourth and last video I wanted to make for today. So I'm over by the Caspersen Beach near Venice, Florida, and this is actually one of my favorite beaches to visit in this part of the state. And as you can see, the water, it has a bit of that turquoise color. So that's actually a really good sign. That basically is telling us that red tide may be present, but at very, very low levels. So that's a good thing. So actually, as a matter of fact, I wanted to point out a couple of specimens that I found while I was walking along the coast. Right now I'm just kind of sitting and chilling right now, just enjoying the shade, you know. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Alrighty, so if you look very closely right here, this is actually not the leaf, but the actual smaller piece. This is actually considered to be a scallop. Specifically, this is actually an Atlantic Kittenpole. Now you may be wondering, like, why is it called Atlantic Kittenpole? Well, that's just given the fact that they are found in the Atlantic, but oftentimes with our currents, they can be carried over into the Gulf as well. In a sense, it's all connected. But yes, these basically are a type of scallop. And with that being said, since they are scallops, they are well known to actually act as filters in our waters. Think of scallops as like mini, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Try to think of scallops as mini air filters or water filters. Yeah, like that we use in our drinking water. That's a great analogy that I like to use when it comes to describing scallops. Now, usually they'll have up to 6 to 10 curve-like ribs along its shell. It looks like on this one there's probably about about 6 or 7, and that's referring to those little ridges that you see along the shell. Now, oftentimes, especially when they're fresh, you'll really see the reddish lines along the shell. However, though, this has probably experienced some weathering, you know, with sunlight, so some of it has kind of went away. But you can see it still slightly, just not by much. But yeah, they're just really neat to find. And oftentimes they know how to attach themselves to particular rocks. Alright, so we're gonna move on to our next specimen. Give me just a second. Alrighty, mates. Alright, so we have now found our next specimen that I ran into while walking along the beach. Alright, so this in particular is actually called a Florida Pricklycockle. Or Pricklycockle, excuse me. Now, that is a rather funny name, but there's a couple of reasons why it's called that. If you actually look carefully along the shell, you can see a lot of those little prickles there. It kind of gives it like a prickly feeling when you touch it. Kind of reminds you of touching a trying to think of an example. Maybe like goosebumps. There we go. Yeah, that those little prickles along the shell could remind you of something like goosebumps on your skin. That's like the closest thing I could think of when comparing. But usually, oftentimes, they do have a lone tooth and socket when they actually are alive. And yeah, I mean, they just feel like bumps once they have a little bit of wear and tear. But usually, when they actually are alive, those pricklies that I'm talking about are usually a lot sharper. And they are characterized by having a bit of their brownish lines that run along their shell. Now, going to the underside, it's a lot smoother to the touch. And oftentimes you'll find a little bit of that darkish purple, as you can see. But yes, this is actually also considered a bivalve. So what that means is it has basically a twin shell, but who knows where it could be. It could literally be anywhere at this point. So it would practically be impossible to find it. So with that being said, along the edge as well, it's very serrated. Kind of reminds you of a leaf that has a lot of serrations. And oftentimes, they are a counterpart to the cockles. But the difference, really, between the two is pricklycockles have a tendency to live a bit further out in the water, up to 100 feet away. But unlike with cockles, on the other hand, they'll usually live just beneath the sand, right up along the coastline. So that's a difference that you can really tell between the two. Now, I believe with cockles too, they don't have like all those prickles that I'm speaking of. But yeah. So I just want to show you guys one more little feature, and yeah, we'll just let those shells stay here. Alright, give me just a second. Alrighty, now that I'm actually standing up and ready to go, here's actually another vine that I wanted to point out that you can find, especially along beach dunes. So this is called a railroad vine. Now, you may be wondering, like, are there any railroads nearby? No, not necessarily. They basically call this railroad vine because of how much it can spread and stretch out, and how usually most times it can stay in a relatively straight line. So what's remarkable about the plant is the fact that it can literally stretch all the way up to the edge of the dune if it can. If it is not facing any resistance, absolutely. Now, with that being said, they do produce a flower that has a bit of purplish color to it. It's actually very pretty to look at when you actually have a chance. And usually this time of the year, yeah, you will see the flowers. But it just depends on how mature the railroad vine is. So that's just something to keep in mind. Usually the older it is, the more flowers you will see on it. But yeah. So actually, you guys, to wrap up this video, I want to try getting up close to the water. But I'm gonna need a second because guess what? I don't have flip-flops, and that sand is very hot. So just give me a second and I will get up to the coastline for you guys. Alright. Here goes nothing. Alright, mates. We made it. We survived. Yay. Alright. So now that we're down by the actual water itself, you can see the beach dunes right up here. This is usually marked by experiencing rapid erosion, which Caspersen Beach is very well known for that. And out in the distance too, you can see some rocks. Those are typically limestone, because much of the content in this water is calcium carbonate. And it's usually the calcium carbonate as a suspended particle and some of our algae that actually creates that turquoise color but not the same algae that creates the red tide. Just something to keep in mind. But yeah. And I've actually done a video that described more of the beach landscape quite a few weeks ago when I was here. But where we are, where I'm standing at in particular, this is called like a swash zone. So this is where the water will come out, and then as it goes back, they call that the backwash. And this is a continuous process. It never stops. Now, if you see some people out there that are standing up, actually what's out there is a sandbar, or as I like to say it, sandbar. And that sandbar is actually what is responsible for slowing down some of those waves that come through here. So actually it's a good thing, because if it weren't for that sandbar, this beach would be experiencing much more rapid erosion. So just something to remember as well. But yeah, and some of that dark minerals you see along the sand, that is basically magnesium that creates that dark color. It's a cool thing, like when I was in Costa Rica, there was a beach called Playa Negra, and that beach was on the Caribbean side, and the sand was completely black, and that was all coming from the magnesium content. Not unlike here, we also see that combination of calcium carbonate, which is why we also see a bit of that lighter color sand. It's just really neat to actually understand like why there are particular features at a beach. It's just really cool, you know? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this scenery too. And forgive me for the length, but like, there's just so much to share in our natural world. It's alright, you guys. Hope you learned something of value today regarding what types of shells you can find along the Gulf, and even like the vine that we saw. Some of you may have seen it before, just wasn't sure what it was. So I hope I filled in that little gap there. And then also, of course, talking about the water. So it's just a pleasure to be out here again, as this is indeed one of my favorite beaches. So alright, you guys, hope you all enjoy your Sunday, and once again, Journey on a Journey is outwards. Take care, and just enjoy this little piece of scenery. Alrighty, peace out, guys.